You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers about hikers for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi guys, it's good to be back with you all again. I'm Steve Adams, or Mighty Blue, and you are listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis, which is one of 6 shows currently available for free on the Hiking Radio Network at hikingradionetwork.com. This show, the Mighty Blue Show, highlights hikers mainly on the Appalachian Trail, though certainly not only on the Appalachian Trail. However, this week's guest, Eric Patterson, otherwise known as Wild, has only ever really had his eyes on the AT. He's been dreaming of doing a thru hike from a very early age, as you'll hear. Eric will be along shortly. After Eric, and a week since she summited Katahdin, I catch up with Katie Westling of Phoenix as she's sitting on the top of a mountain in the 100-mile wilderness. And there's something. I called her through Skype and we chatted away like she was in the next room. Every time somebody tells you that cell service isn't great on the trail, just think how many times Katie and I have been able to catch up on the trail itself. Phones work fine out there. And then Winton Porter, in his book Passing Through, introduces us to another couple of trail characters who've passed through his life. So let's get on and meet Eric Patterson, or Wild. So today's guest is another one of those, I don't know, lucky, unlucky people who chose 2020 as their thru hike year. This is Eric Patterson, or Wild. Hey, Eric, how are you?
I'm doing great, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
Well, good. I'm pleased you are. And I know from some of your videos, you're a pretty happy-go-lucky guy regularly, but you can get quite emotional. We are going to talk about that. Okay. But in retrospect, were you lucky or were you unlucky to go in 2020?
Yeah, reflecting back on it, I absolutely consider myself to be lucky. I've been out on the trail a lot this year with the class of 2021, and the trail is flooded with people living their AT dream. And I do feel that I was absolutely lucky to hike the AT at a time where the numbers were so drastically diminished. It kind of felt like I may have been catapulted back in time 20 years when the numbers were much lower.
Yes, I'd imagine it would actually. So did you find yourself hiking for days sometimes without people, or were there pretty much people around most of the time?
There was a small group of people most of the time, and that was one of my biggest fears going back out. I had to, really ask myself the tough question: am I willing to go out there and literally be practically by myself and go for days and not see anyone? And when I restarted at Sam's Gap, I was so fortunate that I believe within the first 2 hours I'd ran into my first thru hiker, and it was a young lady named Scout from Germany. And so that made me feel really good. And then later in the day, I'd ran into Buckler on top of a mountain, and he was literally sleeping, and he looked like he almost looked like he was dead. He had his trekking poles and a cross. I thought it was some kind of a memorial when I went up, and he was sleeping, and I met Buckler for the first time. So
it's funny, actually, isn't it? You met a young girl from, I don't know how young she was, but a girl from Germany, and you're an older guy. You're not as old as me, but you're an older guy. And the trail just throws us all together, doesn't it? And
it does.
No one looks past what you are right in front of. You are that person right in front of them. And I've got to tell the listeners, by the way, they can't see this because I didn't record the video of this rather. Eric is the first person, apart from my girlfriend, to see me with a bald head, because I've shaved my head especially for the John Muir Trail. This will be airing after the John Muir Trail. Yeah, the reflection is blinding, terrible. He's got his dark glasses on, funnily enough. But before we actually talk about the hike itself, I want you to take us back, and it was a great story you told me. I believe it was 43 years to an overnight hike on the AT when you were 10. Tell us what happened.
Well, it was my first time experience ever in the great outdoors overnight. I had gone out to hike an overnight on the AT with a church group that I was involved with that had an organization kind of for young men, kind of like the Boy Scouts, but it was within that church. So we decided to go in for an overnight to Quarry Gap Shelter here in Pennsylvania, which is just north of Caledonia State Park. And
that's the beautiful double shelter, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's quite amazing.
Oh
it looks
gosh.
much differently
Yes.
today than it did when I had gone back, because it was simply,
interesting. Yeah,
it was just two simple CCC shelters. And now it's kind of evolved into a beautiful, there's a roof built over both shelters. There's a common area. It's just, there's a porch swing and hanging flower pots. It's beautiful. So we stayed overnight there. And I had a lot of fears because just prior to that, maybe 2 weeks, my older brother, he was kind of upset because he had to babysit me. And he took me out on a date, which, turned out to be his wife. And they took me to, yes. And what had happened was they took me to see the movie Grizzly, which was a horror film back in the day. So I was quite traumatized. And I fought my brother tooth and nail. I didn't want to go see it. I was scared. And so, of course, I had all those fears going into Quarry Gap in the overnight. Sure. And then I had heard the leaders, they had stayed up a little bit. They had, told us all to go to bed, and they were wrapping things up. And I remember them saying, we need to put our food up because of bears. And of course, I heard them say that, and I became even more terrified. So the next morning, we were hiking out of the shelter area, heading back to the park. It was a simple overnight, and there was two groups of us that had departed the shelter area, and I was in the latter group, and I wanted to hike forward to the other group, and I did ask permission to do that, and they said, "Sure, go ahead."
As a 10-year-old, they probably wouldn't allow that these days, would they?
Yeah, well, correct, but you think you're on the trail, and what can go wrong? They were just a few minutes ahead, so I wanted to catch up to my friends, so I took off. And one thing I didn't realize was I had no idea what the blazes meant. I had, seen simple markings on the trees. And if they had the conversation with us, what the blazes had meant, white blaze or a double white blaze, the trail was turning. I simply wasn't paying attention. So,
good Lord, the 10-year-old not paying attention.
Yeah. So I never caught up to the first group. The trail had turned. And when I'd gone back years later, I realized where I'd made my mistake, and I ended off on a logging road and just kept going on. And in that area, there's a lot of hikers out doing day hikes, and the chances of me not running into anyone is very slim. But regardless, I took every wrong turn, ended up getting very lost. And, I remember all those fears, coming in. Oh my, grizzly bear is going to get me. And I sat down and had a good cry. I was really afraid. I was scared. I was never going to get out of there. I was never going to see my family again. And
I think I'd do that at 68.
Yeah,
I'd still do that.
So I just remember being so terrified. Like, what am I going to do? Like, maybe it's the fight or flight that's in everyone. Do you just sit there and give up, or do you do something about it? And I just simply remember this incredible sense of calmness that just kind of swept over me. And I felt that came from the forest. And I kind of took a deep breath, and I looked around, and I was like, wow, it really is beautiful out here. And I need to calm down and find my way out. So I remembered a few weeks earlier at the church, they had gone over some things as far as what to do if you were to be lost. And one of the things they had mentioned was if you could find a water source, follow the water source, and you'll usually end up down off of a mountain, or it'll come to a road crossing, or it'll basically come to civilization. So I hiked on for a while, for hours, even ran. I was still scared, and found a water source, hiked down off the side of the mountain. It was getting dark, and crashing through the woods, and I had to gather my thoughts. I'm like, it was getting so dark that it was time to choose a place to camp. Get my sleeping bag out, and try to get a good night's rest, and get up in the morning and continue following it. And when I did, I heard some kids playing in the distance, and I started yelling, help, help. And it was kind of funny because the kids, I moved towards the voices, and they popped out of the woods, and they were like, hey, do you want to play with us? And I'm like, no, take me to your mom. And so I ended up, in short, they took me to their parents, and their parents took me back to Caledonia State Park. That was the first day that I hiked over, 10 miles. I was 15 miles away from Caledonia State Park. And when they took me into the park, imagine
sorry, I didn't catch that. You were how many miles away?
I was 15 miles away from Caledonia, because I was scared, and I'd ran quite a bit. And when I found the water, I had something to drink. So when they took me in, now imagine there's no cell phones or anything back then.
Yes.
And as we pulled in the parking lot, I saw these headlights and this, large group of, there was Pennsylvania State Police there. There were park rangers there.
Wow.
And through all of this, I see my leader. And I'm like, oh, there's my leader. Can you take me over there? So I went over and there's this, and I have no idea what's going on. And so I walk up to my leader and he's talking, and I'm patiently waiting for him to finish talking so I can say, hey, Bernie, I'm here. As it turns out, they were organizing a search party for me. And he turned around and he saw me and he's like, boy, where have you been? He's like, I'm going to kick your butt. And I was just getting ready to call your mother. So in short, I always tell people that was, my first call to Katahdin. I fell in love. You would think that someone would never want to go in the woods again with a.
Yeah. I was wondering about that. And when we spoke before, you said actually that the fear kind of left you. The forest had spoken to you, which is an amazing concept. I know a lot of people feel this as well. And you felt comfortable in the forest surroundings. And
yes, I
during
felt
During that day when you were trying to walk out, were you still okay? Were you okay then? Had you started feeling that relaxed nature then?
Well, I felt much better, and I knew that I needed to devise a plan to get out. So I remember to this day, I had to figure out what I was going to do. So I assessed all the gear that I had a borrowed sleeping bag, a borrowed backpack, and I had a canteen. So when I found water, I knew that I could survive a bit, and I had something to stay warm at night. So, but yeah, I mean, I did calm down a lot. I knew what I had to do to get out. But I felt a great comfort from the forest. It's really wonderful. Strange. It's really strange. And I've had that to this day. When I park my vehicle or when I step into the trail, it's like I won't walk 100 yards and I just feel just so calm. Any stress of life just kind of melts away. It's a wonderful feeling.
So you had the call to Katahdin age 10. You hiked it at 53. So what took you 43 years to hike the AT?
Well, I guess that's a great question. I knew in the back of my mind that I'd always wanted to do it. And I do live in a trail community. So through the years, it just seems like I'm always passing trailheads. And I would see, filthy, dirty hikers with all this gear, strapped to their back. And I became more and more curious about that. And then I started, doing some day hikes of my own on the AT. And you meet people. And I'm the type of person, I just love asking questions and saying hello. And so you find out about their journey. And I remember the first person that told me that they had walked from Georgia. I just couldn't believe it. And that kind of blew me away. I thought that they were, an absolute rock star. And then I just had to dig deeper and find out more about it. But the reason I had, chose to go at the age of 53 is sadly I'd lost two brothers, one at the age of 58 and the age of 59. And I do have a sister who is in a nursing home. And when I go to see her, I see, the residents there at the nursing home. And so many of them are in a wheelchair or sit, they can't get around. And I always say, good morning or good afternoon. I make sure I engage them because that may be the only, personal interaction with anyone that they may get for the day.
Sure.
And as I walk down those hallways, I've always kind of wondered, did those people live their dreams? Did they go for it? Anything that they wanted to do in life, did they do that? Or did they say, hey, I'm going to do it someday, and someday never came? And after I lost my two brothers, I just kind of felt that if I'm going to do this, I have to do it. I can't talk about it anymore. And it's kind of strange when I really got serious about it, I was probably 48, 49. And I just kind of felt this draw to the trail. And it's kind of strange because my whole journey it was uncontrollably unfolded in front of me. I just couldn't stop it. So it just kind of happened. It just kind of happened.
Funny enough, I watched one or two, and I didn't have much time to watch all of them, but I watched one or two of your videos. And the one of you at the top of Springer, back in February, you went in February, early February. I went, right. You went mid-February. I went the 26th, second time. You were very emotional when you talked about those who'd inspired you over the years. And I got a few chills when you said that you were walking in their footsteps. What were you, who were you thinking about at that moment? Do you remember?
I was thinking of every single person who ever took the time to speak to me, about living the AT dream. people who came through my area who they had to put miles on the board. And some of these people stopped right in the middle of their hike and they would take 2 hours to speak to me.
Yes.
And
yes.
the people who took the time to answer my billion questions, people that I've watched, through vlogging, people I've met here locally that I just grew to have a ton of respect for. And when I pointed down that trail, and what people don't realize is I was up there for probably 45 minutes trying to shoot that opening scene. I was a blubbering
I'm
idiot.
Sure.
I was so excited to be there. And I didn't want that to happen. I didn't expect that. It took everything I had to just do my opening scene. And there were a lot of tears that day. I was so happy. I couldn't believe I was there,
But it's wonderful, but it's also slightly daunting when you take those first steps. Don't you think so? Even though you'd actually walked up from the car park, you had to walk back down again. But once you get through the car park or parking lot, whatever you call it over here, I never remember, you go through the parking lot and then you start walking down the trail. Then it feels real, doesn't it? You are by yourself. The cars you've left behind. Was that how you'd imagined it was going to be? Or was it, what was it like for you that time? I mean, you were emotional about the start, but once you got started, you were a mile into it. How did you feel then?
Well, once I was about a mile into it, I guess I can say with complete honesty, I felt like I was home. I felt the forest looked a lot like Pennsylvania. And so as I hiked forward, the toughest step, I truly feel is the first step, seeing that first blaze. And you think for just a moment how far away Mount Katahdin is. And then that's probably one of the few times that I actually thought of how far away Mount Katahdin was, because I just kind of, achieved my daily goals and kept Katahdin at the back of my mind, because I never wanted to think, oh my, I have, so far to go, and let that get in my head. But once I started hiking, probably about, maybe 2 hours into it, I truly felt like I was at home. I'd already done all my shakedown hikes. I knew about my gear. I'd already known how to live out there. I planned accordingly, and it felt great. I truly, any type of stress or anything just melted away in the first 2 hours, and it was all business. Just
it looked like it did. It looked like it did. You really looked at home on the trail as well. It was funny for somebody who hadn't actually done that long distance. I mean, I was the same, because I did something that I'd never done before, really, and it's something that's so it attacks every sense, doesn't it? You're looking around, you're expected to see certain things. Every time I went around a corner, I was expecting to see a bear or something like that.
Right.
I didn't see one for miles, but it's kind of exciting when you get going. But you did say on that video, and maybe I misunderstood it, but you said that you've been on the fence about the trail for quite a long time. What had been holding you back?
I guess committing to the journey. I know there's a lot of people who want to do it and they plan, and then, it's the realization that, hey, I am going to do this. You talk to your family, you talk to your friends. Most of them think that you're crazy. You're out of your mind. How are you going to live? A bear's going to eat you. But, making that commitment to actually go, and where that came from was Frozen with Outdoor Adventures. He allowed me to interview him when he came through for his half-gallon challenge at Pine Grove Furnace, and I've met a ton of people up there. So he allowed me to interview him, and I was shocked at the amount of time that he had spent with me after the camera went off. And of course, he was vlogging it for himself and everything. And he actually stayed there with me. Pine Grove Furnace General Store closed, and we were there until dark. And he was answering all of my questions. He took that amount of time to encourage me. And he had just come back on trail, and his tramley that he was separated from was just a few miles ahead of him. And he was so looking forward to seeing them. But he stayed there with me. And he knew
you must understand. You must understand that, Eric. Now you've done it yourself. You love talking about it. You want to talk about it because those who were like you, who approach somebody, that person who's doing it wants to share that experience, because it's a wonderful experience. And sharing it with somebody who has that passion is a wonderful thing. I always think, you can really only discuss this with people who've done it, because other people, while they love the idea of it, they don't really know what you're talking about until
that is so true.
They've actually done even 500 miles or 200 miles, whatever it is, just being on the trail for a period of time, that say 2 weeks on the trail, that you know what it's like to be out there. And in your case, that this guy shared with you because you were interested and he wanted to talk about it. And I'm sure you do exactly the same now, don't you?
Absolutely. And well, 2 words that he said as he walked away, this is what got me off the fence. And it just kind of clicked with me. He turned around and he said, he was walking backwards and he said, "Don't wait." He said, "You can do this. Don't wait. You need to do this now." And I remember coming home and telling my sweetheart, "I'm going." And from that moment, I never looked back. I knew that, I was on the fast track to Katahdin's, or the slow track, I should say.
You're jumping forward too far. You told your sweetheart you were going. What did she say to you, though?
Well, she had heard it many times. She had heard me.
Oh, right. Okay.
She knew I was planning, and her and I had watched vloggers for probably 3 years prior to that. And she loved watching vloggers. It was always like, who are we watching now, and what trail are they on? She's very, very knowledgeable. Nice. Although she's not a hiker herself, she's extremely knowledgeable. And I went home and she's like, "Okay, yep, I know." And the next thing you knew, she was driving me to the train station in Washington, D.C. And I think that's when it really hit her that I was leaving.
Yes, I know. So she was on board. Personally, I find spousal support to be one of the critical elements in a successful through hike. It must be the toughest thing to keep going when you're getting, demands from home. But to have that support, rigid, solid support, really makes a difference when you're out there, doesn't it?
It meant all the difference in the world. It really did. Because I think people who are considering doing this, when they have family at home or a wife or a loved one, it's not just you being out there. Your support people at home, they're going through the journey as well, and not just seeing the pictures that you may see. My youngest daughter, she was really concerned because her father was going to be away, because I was just a phone call away and I wasn't going to be that close anymore. And, when you're the man of the house and you're taking care of, I do a lot of maintenance and fix a lot of things, and not having that, being instantaneously accessible. I was really worried, and she endured a lot, and she went through a lot while I was gone. But
I think the trail, one of the wonderful things about the AT, particularly in my view, is that it is so accessible. So were there to be an issue, you can get off pretty quickly, can't you?
Yes, you can. And I did do that. I mentioned before to you on our call, I've worked in the entertainment business for 28 years, and I had to come home for 10 days to take care of 2 weddings. And they were rescheduled because of COVID. So, I was fortunate to have a good friend of mine, and I drove all the way to top of New Hampshire to pick me up, came home, took care of that. And then I was able to get right back out and get started again. So.
Right. So, and you decided to put a YouTube channel together, and I guess this was inspired by the fact that, firstly, you've been in entertainment before, maybe, and you knew what you're doing, but also, I suppose, that having watched those other channels, you thought you could do the same sort of thing. Was it really just for family, or were you looking to grow it? Because you've got about 14,000 supporters, I think it is, on your channel right now.
At one point, it was around 10,000, and it has been, diminishing because I haven't put a lot of videos out since I've come home. And for me, it was more of a documentary, for my family, to share that journey with them firsthand. And then also for me to preserve the hike, because, I won't, I can't write a blog. I just don't have the patience to do something like that. And I respect anybody who does. And I thought, hey, I'll just turn a camera on and document it that way. So that was the main reason.
It's quite a commitment. Don't you find, though, that it's because, those days when it's cold and wet and you think, oh my God, I've got to do so. Because you posted quite regularly, didn't you? You seemed to anyway.
I posted a video for every single day that I was out there. And at
that's
times,
a commitment.
Yes, it was tough at times. And I was so fortunate to have the amount of people who supported me and encouraged me during such a tough time. It was a COVID year, and I had a tremendous amount of support from people who were basically walking along with me. And I did my best to read all the comments and everything, but everyone was so encouraging. I really didn't expect that. So I've told a lot of people, not only did I have the encouragement from my family and friends at home, but I can't tell you how much it meant to have the support from other enthusiasts and people who were walking with me through social media. And it was quite amazing. It lifted me up a lot. And I did have a few tough days out there, but that really, really inspired me and carried me through.
I bet it did. But, as you mentioned, COVID took over. You actually started, I think, was you say 15th of February? Something like that, 15th of February?
February 16th.
Yeah, so I remember, and we've had this in the show before, because I've asked people this question, and people, I've got different answers, really. So did COVID permeate into the hiking community early on, or did you mainly ignore it at first? Because it was about a month before you got off trail, wasn't it?
It was. And when I left, I hardly even heard of COVID. I'd heard of it before, but never expected anything to come of it whatsoever. None of us did who were starting that early. And I remember when it got real, we were in Hot Springs. I remember coming into Hot Springs and we stayed at the Elmer's Sunnybrook Inn.
Lovely.
And went across the street for resupply into the Dollar General. And there was just this sense of stress in the air with the customers. And I remember right after I walked in, someone was yelling, literally screaming at the manager saying, "I just talked to you 2 hours ago. I drove 2 hours to get toilet paper," of course. That was a high commodity. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And so grab my resupply and, I hear people in line whispering and talking about where they bought this and that. And I'm like, wow, hey, this is crazy. So went straight across back to Elmer's, and they called all of us into the living room and they said, as of today, we are closed. You're welcome to stay here. And they allowed us to zero the next day. And they said, we want to make it clear, anyone else behind you, don't invite them here. We are closed. And I'm like, wow, this is really real. And I remember we went out to eat that evening and there was just kind of a buzz in the community. And then we were headed towards Irwin. And
so were you done at that point? Did you leave home then, or when did you actually leave? I thought you left at Hot Springs.
Just past Hot Springs. We had made it to Sam's Gap. And so it was shortly after Hot Springs.
So you left at Sam's Gap, and it's funny actually. It was only a year ago, but it's hard to, a year and a bit ago. It's hard to take our minds back to those times, isn't it? Really. So did you think you were done because it was getting worse and worse and worse, wasn't it? So you think you were done for that year?
The thought had crossed my mind when we had initially left the trail. I was hiking with Dryker, Random, and the Rev. And I remember when we were at Sam's Gap shelter and we actually walked backwards about a mile, toughest mile of my life for us to basically extract. And we had a plan to come back 2 weeks and we were going to bring some vehicles back and flip-flop with them. We thought it was just going to go away.
Sure.
And, 2 weeks turned into, almost 2 months of waiting to come back, and it just got worse. So
what was the thought process then about going back? I mean, did you, because I know nothing opened up officially. So you obviously made a conscious decision to get back out there. Was it because you were missing it so much, or because you thought you'd be safer out there?
Well, it was, you actually hit it right on the head right there. It was two things. The first most important question was whether or not I could do it safely. And I knew I could do it a lot safer than going to my local Walmart store. And that's completely true. So
I loaded up anytime.
Yes. So I loaded up a whole stack of resupply boxes to last me until I hit Pennsylvania. And I thought, if I have to do my laundry in the woods in a stream, if I have to bathe in a stream, and if I have to go the most important thing was post offices remaining open so I could get my food.
That's right.
And, making it to Hot Springs, as a thru-hiker, when you come out of Hot Springs, you're high on life. You're like, wow, you're almost validated. Hey, I've got a chance to make this.
That's right.
Then boom, the carpet was ripped right out from underneath me. And it wasn't injury. It wasn't, a desire to quit. And I sat here, for almost 2 months and just tearing myself apart over the decision to go back out. And I'm glad that I did. I do feel that I did it safely. Not only myself. I remember, one of those first days back out, we were at a water source and a young lady walked up and I knew that I was in good company. She dropped her phone on the ground. So being a gentleman, the first thing I wanted to do was reach down and pick up her phone for her. And another hiker was right there with me. We were both reaching for it at the same time and we stopped.
Wow.
And we looked at each other and we're like, no, we have to be safe. So we were, nobody shared anything out there. We very rarely stayed in a shelter. We usually did tent sites or even camped away from the shelter areas.
Wow.
But we were very, very cautious, and that was very important to me going out, being able to be safe.
And did anybody get COVID when you were out there? I've heard of no one who actually got it out there.
To my knowledge, there is not a single case of COVID with the class of 2020, whether it be the hikers or even in a hostel.
Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool?
Yes. And same thing with norovirus. There was no norovirus out there either.
Yeah. So coming back must have felt a little like starting over, I guess, because you'd lost all your legs and everything. And did it take you long to get back into your rhythm? You said you immediately met Scout, which must have been great because, suddenly you're home and doing whatever it is you do at home. And your body just not so much shuts down. It shuts down away from hiking, doesn't it? It gets into a different rhythm.
Sure.
Did you find your rhythm back on the trail as soon as you got back?
Steve, I got to be honest. I had to go back and look at my videos. I think the first day I came back out, I did like a 17. I was so excited to be out there.
Oh my God.
and I thought, hey, just, one more campsite or one more shelter area. And I can't remember which one it was, but I went back out and I got right at it. I was just so excited to be back out there.
Well, you obviously did get right at it because I suppose in many ways, starting early and allowing yourself in the first month to get as far as you did, it allowed you when you came back to get to Katahdin because you got to Katahdin on October the 12th and it looked about as perfect a day as I've ever seen Katahdin. It looked beautiful. So, but once more, you were quite emotional. You said that as you were approaching Katahdin, because I think you were trying, I don't know whether you'd worked this out before, and you were trying to not give a speech, but you were just talking to the camera, and it was important to you it seemed to be important to you what you were saying. And you said that you'd found peace on the trail.
I did.
Where did you find peace from, and have you retained that peace?
Actually, I do feel that I have retained that peace. And I would just say, I would describe it as, life is kind of like the AT. You have the peaks and the valleys, and you have the days that you deal with bad weather. Life deals that to you sometimes. And I just feel that making that journey, obviously, it was a spiritual journey for me. There's no mistaking that if you watch my videos.
Nice.
But I kind of, compare things kind of like almost like the layers of an onion, like through life. When you lose a loved one or you may experience some challenges, it's almost like you add an extra layer of an onion. And I feel that being out there, I was able to sort some things out and kind of, take the time to mourn the loss of, both of my parents are gone.
Yeah, sure.
They've been gone for years, my brothers.
Yeah.
And, just things that I was alone with myself and I had a chance to, really deal with a lot of things that I could give the attention that it needed without the distractions of the world.
Did your sweetheart notice a difference in you? Because I know you got post-trail depression, like it seems most people seem to when they leave the trail. Did she see differences in you, good and bad? They're not all positive, are they? I don't think they're all positive because you go through quite a bit in your head, don't you? And I found myself withdrawing into my head quite a lot to start with. I opened up again later, but
Right. I think she's probably seen, good and sadly, and I have to admit it as far as the bad and being away from the trail and me missing it so much.
Yeah.
And, I can only apologize for that. And, but we still have a great relationship. She knows that she's actually encouraged me to go out and do another long trail.
She wants you to.
Well, yeah. And I don't think she's trying to get rid of me.
No,
I think she realizes how much I enjoy being out there, and she believes in achieving her goals as well. And she would never keep anything like that from me, but kind of like with the AT, she's like, you got to figure out how you're going to do it. I got nothing to do with it, but you have to figure out. And, if I go do another long trail, one thing I'm going to do for sure is I'm going to have all of the landscaping done here at my home. Cause I just, she wanted to do it so bad. And she's like, hey, the lawnmower, it has a drink holder. I'll mow the grass. And I just think, she has a very high stress job and she needs to decompress when she comes home. And in my opinion, the last thing she should worry about is some, mowing the grass. So she needs her peace.
But they're right. But one thing you learned, and looking at one of your post-trial videos, was that motion seems to be the answer, was what you said.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, and I think that's true of everybody. Because I felt the physiological effects straight away out on the trail.
Right.
How good you feel. You kind of get into that rhythm, you're marching away and so on.
Absolutely.
But I think I struggled like crazy when I got home physically. I think I was all a bit beaten up. But the motion itself, the movement, is a great thing to have, isn't it?
Yes, and I was certainly beaten and battered when I came home. And
yes.
It definitely took a few weeks to feel like I, wasn't walking around with a hiker hobble, if you will. So
yeah, everybody gets that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And since you finished, I know you're going back to the trail because I believe you're also responsible for one of the shelters on or near the trail, aren't you?
Yes, I'm actually now the caretaker or overseer of Raven Rock Shelter, which is the last northern shelter in the state of Maryland. So although I live in Pennsylvania, I can be standing at the shelter between driving and hiking in about 40 minutes. So it's really, really close for me. Yes.
What's that feel like? Does it feel like you're re-engaged with the trail and you're helping others? I mean, it must give you a certain sense of pride when you see it and it's been looked after.
Yes. I mean, it does give me a great sense of pride. I love helping, people who come in. It could be a day hiker coming through or a through hiker, a section hiker, and just engaging them and just answering any questions. Sometimes they may be having a bad day. They may be beat up and I can lift their spirits and give them some confidence, to move forward. So, but it's been a great way to re-engage the trail and give back, give back to the trail that's given me so much,
It clearly has given you a lot from watching your videos. You're full of the joy of it. And I thought back to the 10-year-old you. And so let's go back to that 10-year-old you. Was the adventure of the 53-year-old Eric anything like what the 10-year-old had imagined when he felt that the trees were talking to him?
That's actually a great question. There's definitely some similarities. I feel that the trail, literally, I can feel the energy from it when I step onto it. And I just feel that I'm able to tap into that, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Of course it does.
Yeah.
Of course it does.
Yes.
We all feel it. It's that,
yes.
It's that feeling that there's this thin ribbon connected all the way up, the eastern spine of America. It's extraordinary. Right. And you really feel that energy almost like, it's a bit like hearing on the trail something that's happened 2 states ahead or 4 states behind. It reaches you very quickly, doesn't it? You hear what's going on around you. And I think it's a wonderful thing. But look, I'm really glad that I got the chance to talk to you about your journey. And if the PCT's next, well, that will be my next choice, I think, as well. Right. So if you do it, let me know. And perhaps when you go and do that one, we'll have you back on the trail and talk about the PCT.
Sounds great. That sounds awesome.
Okay, man. Well, thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks again for having me, and congratulations on an awesome podcast. I've been enjoying going back and listening to some of your guests, and it's very well done. Congratulations, Steve.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much. Cheers, then.
Cheers.
Bye. I thought that was quite poignant, actually. He goes to a nursing home and says hi to a couple of patients there and wonders whether or not these people have lived out their dreams. How sad it must be to know that you haven't lived your dream. And it's even sadder to know that you never will, because you'll never get that chance. If there's a lesson to be learned here, it's the importance of doing stuff while you can. Because one day, not too far in the future, you may not be able to do it ever. Thanks for their support this week goes to monthly donors Mike DiCello, Terry Hackler, Ann Dobson and Ann Hinton, while Mary Stewart and Michael Sell also made generous donations. Mary says, "Thanks for all you're doing for the MST. And for those of you who don't know, Jester's Section Hiking podcast has been heavily featuring the Mountains to Sea Trail, which is the MST, recently. In fact, I believe that a big anniversary of the trail is coming up and being celebrated right now. Check out some of those episodes. Anyway, thanks to all of you who have recognised the value that we're bringing you and paying us back with value of your own. If you'd like to support our shows, just head to hikingradionetwork.com and click on one of the donate buttons there. And if you don't do that, you can help repay us by buying one of my books about my 2014 thru-hiker of the Appalachian Trail. I mentioned them on the show last week and sold 10 just like that. So I'm going to have a link in the show notes going forward. Now, it's Katie sitting on a mountain in the 100-mile wilderness. Here she is.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, Kenny, you sound very clear. How are you?
Good. Well, I'm surprised because I only have one little tiny bar.
Okay. Well, let's just go straight into it then. Where are you? Where are you then?
I am at the top of Mount 3.5.
Oh, right.
I think that's just kind of so there's the Chairback Mountains,
Right.
and there's 4 of them. And then there's this little peak between Mountain 3 and Mountain 4, and I am on the top of the little peak, which is 3.5.
So you're about 6 days or 5? Is it 5 or 6 days into the 100-mile wilderness?
Today is day 6.
And have you enjoyed it?
I love it. It's beautiful out here. It is
beautiful.
beautiful. Oh my goodness.
Beautifully quiet, and just so wild out there, isn't it?
Yes. I haven't seen any moose yet, though.
Oh, dear.
Anyway.
I can guarantee you one thing. I bet you've seen a lot of moose poop, haven't you?
A lot. And I have a photo of a hoof print.
Nice. Well, it's a start.
Yeah.
So who are you hiking with now?
Yeah.
Who are you hiking with now?
Well, right now I'm with a woman whose trail name is Ginger, and she is actually in her 70s. We don't hike together during the day. We just kind of, we'll try to meet up. And, if we can, we stay at the same place. Sometimes it doesn't work out, so we don't. Yeah. But she is in her 70s, I think. I should be really upset if I had that one wrong. And she has done like 1,300 miles of the PCT. Wow. She has, I think, just under 400, around 400 left to do of the AT. And she has done the John Muir Trail like 3 times in her life. So
tell her I'm incredibly jealous.
Yeah.
Anyway, so thank you for reminding me. Thanks for reminding me, by the way.
Anyway, I feel like I can learn a lot from her. She's very relaxed, and she just takes it all in stride.
I actually meant to ask you that last time. I'm sure you've been hiking for some time when you decided to do this. How have you changed? What have you learned as a hiker? Obviously, you've learned about not rushing out to try to do it too fast and try to listen to your body. Mm-hmm. But have you seen development in your own hiking style?
Yeah, I have a system every day for setting up and breaking down my tent, whatever. But I would say more, it's not about, I just don't fret. I don't fret about when, am I going to get to Monson, by this date or this date, but, take every day. I've had a day out here, I felt really good. I went 20 miles. Next day, it's like, well, I'm going to relax, and, we're getting to more hills. The terrain has changed. So I just go slower. I definitely just kind of a steady, slower hike, I guess. I don't storm up mountains, like I was trying to conquer them. Well, sometimes, that you think I'm just going to power through. I don't even think about powering through. I just, I just slowly, work my way up the mountain, and,
So, and now you've worked out a different way to do it. Then, are you enjoying the hike more because you worked out a different way to do it?
I feel I'm definitely enjoying my hike more. I guess I just am grateful for every day, Steve. It's just, who gets to play in the wilderness of Maine?
Yeah.
You're back here. But I will say that I wasn't going to mention this, but I did meet a few people who just were really struggling and were really unhappy. And so it's challenging. It definitely is challenging out here. And, but I don't know. I just think hiking the AT really is just another metaphor for living your life, isn't it?
Oh, totally, yeah. And I wonder then, so those people who are struggling, are they carrying on because they're so near the end, or are they going southbound as well? Because if they're struggling and not enjoying it, why don't they just stop? Or are they now just within sight of the end and they just want to get there?
Yeah, some of the northbounders just really look fatigued. They're and that's understandable. Boy, they've been pushing hard.
Sure.
I met one man who had done 30 miles in this terrain, and and he was like, "Oh, I have to get to Katahdin because my flight leaves at my shuttle arrives at 12 that day.
Oh,
the day he's come at 12 noon." I said, "Well," he said, "Well, I'm going to try to start like at 3 a.m." And I thought, "Oh my gosh," I just don't relate to that.
Yeah. And now you're going south. And now you're going south, as opposed to north. You're obviously running into more northbounders, which must be kind of nice as well, I'm sure. Are there many southbounders? Because it's now the end of August, so I suspect a lot of the southbounders started already, haven't they?
Yes, and I've seen a few, but I mean, if we're all kind of going at similar paces, you don't really see too many.
Sure.
I do know that the shelters have seemed packed, and so a few times we just stealth camped, tried to find a place to camp because the shelters and all the tenting areas around the shelters are full. So, I think this is that time where you have the southbounders, the ones who have flipped, are filling up the wilderness, and the ones who are heading north, trying to beat the fall weather coming in for Katahdin.
Yes,
So, I mean, but typically I've only seen, maybe during the day, about maybe 4 hikers. And,
are you okay with that? Are you okay with that? Or because to me the social part of it was all about the social part. But for you, you're quite happy with not seeing too many people?
I am absolutely quite happy with that. and I do, I mean, when I see people, I do enjoy just chatting for a few minutes or saying hi. And I just passed a northbound hiker and her daughter, who looks like she's about 10 years old. And it's a mother and daughter, and they're on their way to Katahdin. They have done the entire trail, and I think her name is Super Mom and Super Girl.
Nice.
They were adorable.
So how far are you through the wilderness now? You got how long have you got to get to Monson?
Today is Tuesday, I think, and so plan to be finished by Thursday. Yeah, so about a week. It will have been a week. I started on Thursday. I'll finish on Thursday.
And you got a resupply part. Was it a Joe Mary Road?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, they're doing it now at, I think it's called Crawford Pond, or it's just past. It's just south of Joe Mary Road.
Oh, right. Okay.
So they don't. I think they drop it. Yeah, which is supposedly a little bit more like halfway.
Right, and that worked out okay. And that worked out okay. They were there waiting for you.
It was,
that was cool.
Well, you know what they do? They stash it in these 5-gallon buckets inside of a sealed up plastic bag under a tarp, and you get these instructions for how to find it.
Oh my
it's
God!
Really kind of fun, like a scavenger hunt.
Oh dear, it's a shocker if you can't find it. Then, because I know that when I did it, they met me in their truck, and it was fine. It worked out, and I would have been, and it's funny if you mentioned that guy having to catch his plane. That's such a shame to have to rush the end of your hike when really you should be enjoying those moments.
Gosh. So he'll be climbing Katahdin in the dark, he won't have those views. And that is unfortunate.
If he starts at 3, he probably won't get light till about 6. So he'll probably still see. Yeah, it's going to take him 3 or 4. It took me 4 hours to get up and 5 hours to get down. So it's going to be quite tight for him to get a 12 o'clock shuttle, I tell you, unless he's super fit.
That's a burden I could not carry with me. So I hope he makes it. So,
well, I'm glad you've enjoyed the 100-mile wilderness so far. You've got so much more beautiful stuff to see in Maine, and then of course you've got the magnificence of New Hampshire. So when we speak next week, you'll still be in Maine. So I think it's about 260 miles is Maine, something like that. It's quite a bit.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you're still here for a little while longer. It's not Virginia.
Still have a lot more to do.
Yeah, you're right.
More to do. So,
well, look, fortunately, the one bar worked for us, and so we were able to catch up. Keep on going, and we'll talk to you next week and talk about Monson and some of the mountains, the beautiful mountains south of Monson. All right.
Okay, Steve. All right. Take care.
Bye then. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Actually, after we spoke, she texted me the following day and said that she'd like to explore one of my questions further, the one about how she'd changed and how a hike has changed. So prepare for a bit of self-reflection next week. She ended the text by telling me that she can't stop thinking about it. My God, what's happened? Well, if you tune back in next week, she'll doubtless tell you. Before we get on to Winton Porter's book, Passing Through, I wanted to mention once more about some of you becoming part of the Hiking Radio network of podcasts. There is a cost to it, but it's certainly worthwhile, as you'll be part of a stable of shows, have a website given to you, be taught actually how to podcast, and have your shows edited and posted by me as your producer. You can start whatever podcast you like, either a one-off hike or a regular show about hiking, where you introduce the stuff that's important to you, whether it's gear, the PCT, Maryland, or even my nemesis, the John Muir Trail. Anything that's hiking related and you are passionate about can be made into a podcast. And, of course, you'll have a ready-made audience prepared to give you a shot and listen. How you then do is up to you. Reach out to me by email at steve@hikingradionetwork.com. We can talk about how we're going to make it happen. So now our mountain crossings guy, Winton Porter, introduces another couple of the characters who he's met over the years. I'll see you next week. Chapter 3. It ain't about the miles. Margie jumps out of the bedroom, shrieking in terror. Her big brown eyes convey disgust, her screech means mouse, and the waving of a slipper, well, I don't know what that means. What happened? Are you all right? I sit up on the couch, blinking. The TV remote slides from my lap and falls to the carpet among bald dolls and mixed-up shoes. No, Margie shrieks. I was putting on my slipper and couldn't get my foot in. I kept jamming my foot, and I was jamming it, and when I picked up the slipper and shook it, and a dead mouse fell out. I try to hide my smile, but I can't. She catches me. You think it's funny? She screams. 4-year-old Sierra scrambles behind Margie to get a peek at the mouse and cries, Mum, you hurt Mickey Mouse bad, but he's still moving. Our golden retriever, Skydog, runs over and sits at Margie's feet, offering her head for petting, and waiting for confirmation that her mistress is all right. Jezebel, the hyper tabby, appears on the scene, pounces on the dead mouse, seizes it in her jaws and runs out of the room. Sierra screams even louder. Mum, Jezebel took Mickey. I think she's going to fix him and make him better, so don't worry. Margie starts to laugh, that laugh so dear to me these many years. We live above the hiker hostel, part of mountain crossings on the Appalachian Trail, literally on it. The hand-built 300-pound American chestnut door of our home opens onto the covered breezeway, our own 5 yards of the AT. Just as the main store used to be a dance hall, the house connected to it was once the old Wallasey Yee Inn, and golden numbers from the hotel days are still mounted on the doors. Margie and I made a master bedroom out of room 3 on the cold north side of the house. The baby, Allison, and young Sierra sleep in room 1 on the south side, and room 2, again on the north wall, is a fabricated kitchen consisting of a plastic sink, a stove, and a refrigerator. The den had been the inn's common area. The walls, floors, and ceiling of this room were of the same dark chestnut, which makes the atmosphere shadowy yet serene. The den also holds the primary heating system, an old stone fireplace with a bronze plaque bearing a dedication to Mr. Frederick Vogel Jr. and August H. Vogel, the men who donated the property to the Georgia Department of Natural Resources back in the late 1920s. The winters are hard. Whatever the temperature is outside, it will be about 10 degrees warmer on the inside. On many nights, we have to put liquids in the refrigerator to keep them from freezing. It has become a family game to try to fight back the cold, tacking sheets of plastic to the walls, nailing frayed climbing rope into baseboards, shoving cast-off sleeping bags into door jambs. In the winter, we just surrender the 3 bedrooms, close them off, and live huddled together in the den. We're afraid to light the fireplace until it can be inspected, and we don't have enough money to hire a chimney sweep. We run a ceramic heater, and on a good night, we can get the temperature in the room above 50 degrees, depending on the outside temperature. It is chilly, but it is our home. Although there are plenty of days that provide reason to complain, of cold, or the mice in her slippers, or the spiders that crawl out of the drains, Margie rarely does. She loves the journey we are on, and she believes in me, even on days when I don't fully believe in myself. The joys, setbacks, celebrations, difficulties, and laughs of 22 years together, a relationship built from shared experiences and respect, a marriage and a passionate friendship, have formed the bond that will get us through these anxious times and keep us warm in the cold. Margie has aged gracefully. She is astoundingly cute, stylish, and sexy, and now has added a hint of aged elegance. Her kindness and humour shine in her face. Her smile will melt anger. For more than 2 decades, she has been my best friend. I can't imagine my life without her. As I search the house, picking up bloody pieces of the mouse, Jezebel didn't fix Mickey after all, a faint sound rattles against the door. It's the uncommitted knock that tells me that a weary hiker has wandered off the dark trail, doesn't know where else to turn, and doesn't know whether he should be here or not. I tack on a smile, unlatch the door, and greet the traveller. "Hello, how can I help you?" The man outside surprises me after that timid knock, with a crisp, robust baritone voice. "Hi, I'm the preacher man. You can call me Preach, and I'm hiking to Maine to spread the word of God. Could you tell me where the nearest Baptist church is round here?" His face is greatly animated as he speaks. He purses his lips, his eyebrows jump up and down. The movements suggest that he's been practicing them for years. So I'm thinking he's either a real backwoods southern preacher or a guy who has worked pretty hard on his act. I step into the breezeway, shutting the door so as not to let precious heat escape the house. "Nice to meet you, Preach. Here in the North Georgia mountains, if you want a Baptist church, all you need to do is pick a road. They all seem to lead to one." Preach steps back away from the massive door, giving me room. He wobbles briefly under his heavy blue JanSport pack. Judging by the look of this pack, vintage 1972 external frame, he might have been a Boy Scout the first time he carried it. It's much too small for his big body now, and it's badly overloaded. "Well, that's great," he says. "You got a phone book? Maybe I could call one, and they could come pick me up." "Maybe, but it's Thursday night. Do you really think they will be sitting in the office at this hour answering phones?" "You got a point." He thinks for a moment. "What's your name, son?" "They call me Winton." "Is that your trail name?" "No, sir. Some people call me Jesby, but you can call me Winton. It's easier." That's good enough for Preach, who kindly spares me a longer conversation about how I got my trail name. I can see that he's too cold and footsore to show much curiosity. He holds up his fists one by one and blows into them. I tell him that the hostel's closed, but I have a place where he can sleep. "Head down those stairs," I say. "I'll get a key." My trail name is Just B, which, when pronounced with a southern drawl, sounds like Jesby. The name was given to me by a long-time friend, mentor and teacher who went by the name of Billy Bumblefoot. Hikers have been taking on trail names probably since traipsing across the land became a pastime. Perhaps it is a way to further separate ourselves from the world outside the woods, to break with our boxed-up lives and to free ourselves to just be who we are. I rarely use my own trail name and rarely share it on the trail, but I always sign shelter and hospitality guest books on the trail with the name Jesby. Now Preach removes his pack from his back and tries to carry the cumbersome load to the stairs with one arm, hunching his shoulder up. I turn and go inside for the key to unlock the door below. When I come back out, Preach is standing at the top of the stairs, studying his pack, which is now at the bottom of the stairs. "Divine intervention," he remarks with a chuckle. "The Lord snatched the pack from my hand and cast it down them stone stairs." I escort Preach down the old steps and into the lower section of the building. The 15-bunk hostel below our little apartment has been closed for a number of years. Later, I'll open it up again, but for now it serves as a storage facility for the store. Like bones decaying in a sad, lightless cave, old mannequins lie in pieces among the empty and disused bunk beds. I hold the door for Preach and gesture him into the main room. He pauses just inside the door and takes a deep breath, drawing in the flavour and musty smells of years past, then rubs his eyes with his hands, slowly and firmly, as if to re-establish himself in the present. "American chestnut, right?" he says, indicating the timber walls. "Yes, sir. Built in 1937. They used to call the chestnut the redwood of the East. Some surpass 100 feet in height and have girths big enough to drive a small car through. Work teams from the CCC, Franklin D. Roosevelt's Civilian Conservation Corps, harvested the big trees when blight threatened to kill them off. One of the beautiful things they built with the wood was my house." Preach steps farther into the room. "Where's that couch?" I walk over to the haggard, brown paisley couch and sweep a few mannequin parts from the cushions. "This is it. Home sweet home, warm and worn." Preach sits on the couch, pats the cushions on each side of him with his hands, and declares it perfect. "Better than that foam sleeping pad I've been on for the past 4 nights, he says. I tell him I ought to get back to my family and ask if there's anything else I can do for him. "No, this is perfect, perfect," he says again. "You open at 8:30? "Yes," I say. "I'll be there and I can help you get that pack organised and fitted in the morning." "Great," he says. "I made a few mistakes." But he isn't talking about his pack now. "I made a few mistakes. I hear this is the place that will show me the light and the way." Wondering where on earth he heard that, I have to smile. From the door I can barely make him out. "The light, maybe, but the way is all you, preacher man, it's all you. Have a good night." I turn and walk out, closing the door behind me. With Preacher Man all tucked in, I climbed the stairs to the breezeway, but the Baptist fellows asking me about my trail name had set me thinking about Billy. Billy Bumblefoot had been a positive force in my ward for a long time. He's an old man with a childlike spirit, unassuming but confident, curious and wise. Billy apparently has a house in Florida, but he is only an occasional visitor there. His real home is in the woods, where he spends most of his days. However, it's not uncommon for him to be seen roaming around trail towns or sitting at a bar, sipping a bottle of grape soda, his favourite drink. He is a whimsical old man with a flowing white beard that waves just below his neckline. The little hair that he has always hides beneath an old floppy tilly hat, once black, now faded to charcoal grey, that has a rare Appalachian Trail logo patch that reads "Georgia to Maine" sewn into the front. Billy is slightly built, but strong. I've never asked his age, although we have celebrated several of his birthdays. Margie always serves the same thing: 1 chocolate brownie with 1 candle, a shot of shine, a glass of milk mixed with Hershey's chocolate syrup. But my guess is that he is in his late 60s. He's probably as fit as any 40-year-old marathoner, and he can out-hike most 20-year-old kids. He carries an old hand-carved hickory hiking stick, with his motto carved down the side in large, carefully scripted letters embossed with white stain. "Hi, I'm Billy Bumblefoot. Just passing through, thank you." Billy is quiet by temperament, and when he speaks he's deliberate and often funny. He has taught me a great deal over the years, but I think I've learned the most from his compassion for life and his humility. He always carries a tattered little notebook to record notes or thoughts. Once, in the shop, after I'd rattled off all the trips and accomplishments and miles I'd logged over the years, he looked at me, into me, pulled out his little book and started writing. He briskly ripped off the sheet of paper and slid it across the table toward me. Then he smiled, winked, and got up and walked out of the shop. His note read, "Miles, months, days, hours, and minutes of those who choose to keep a scorecard in life. Son, someday you will come to know it ain't about the miles, it's all about the smiles."